Welcome to Dominic, Ake, and Cosima, our speakers. Everything from this point is going to appear on the it's being recorded and will appear on the YouTube channel, just so you're aware. And we're going to have our three speakers and then an opportunity for questions. So our first speaker is Dominic Blondell, who has been here since, well, you tell the story, Dominic.
I've been here since 1959, off and on. I have spent 15 years in Spain, but off and on since 1959, and I'm now 63, so I'm retired. Yeah, I worked for the last 24 years in a university in London. But now I'm very happily retired. It's marvelous. However, I suppose, yes, we were a typical family affected by Brexit. My father was here since the mid-50s. My parents married here in 1954. I have a younger sister who has British nationality because she was born here. And I have two sons who are half Spanish, who also live here. And so when, I suppose, we live in a very leafy Colchester, Essex, nobody believed Brexit was really going to happen. So I think families like us were very impacted by the whole thing. And I can't see the settlement scheme outside of Brexit. It's part and parcel of the whole 2.5, 3 and 4 years now. How long is it since Brexit? 5 years.
5 years. Well, 5 years since the referendum.
5 years.
5 years tomorrow.
5 years tomorrow. And the settlement scheme came out in 2019, March, I think at the end of March.
Yeah, 29th of March was the public rollout.
That's right. And we were lucky enough to be able to do it in February of 2019. So in that sense, possibly it was easier for the applicants. I don't know. What is sure is that it was a complicated system to go through their application on a phone, for which you had to have another application in order to be able to take a photograph, because they wanted a photograph, and that was a difficult thing to do for each individual case. So many hours, many hours playing with the software, and my father has no mobile phone. My younger son is a bit anti-techno, so he doesn't have a mobile phone, not a smartphone either. And my other son is a very busy doctor who just couldn't believe what was happening, I think. So it took me about a week, I think, to get everything together to do mine and my father's, and the beginning of the applications of the two boys, who were in their mid-20s at the time. And my father was in a very depressed state of mind because he couldn't understand how this live and let live country that he'd come to live in had all of a sudden become so difficult and complicated. So we just, every day I found a new thing that I could manage to do. And so we just plodded on, one step at a time. And at the time I got the impression that we really didn't know what the following step was going to be. So you were going a little bit blindly into the application. But it was the identity question was the most difficult one, because that's where you needed all the photograph things. After that, the status, the first question they asked you for was your national insurance number. And in the case of two retirees, then that's pretty clear, isn't it? So they didn't ask for anything else, except that we did have to send our passports. We had to pay £65 that was later returned to us, and wait. It had to go super delivery and with an extra envelope and a plastic covering in between and all sorts of things like that. And so there was lots of little steps that you had to be very careful at every single step, but we did it. So, I mean, it was amazing. I've heard much worse stories around me of people who've been unable do it. And I don't know what they did for all the older people in the population. I read today that it's only 2%, so perhaps I don't care. But there are lots of people who wouldn't have had access to, the printer, the scanner, everything that you needed to be able to have on hand. So I consider myself very lucky. So for us, very good. I hear there are about 5.5 million now people who have applied, which shows that they did rather get the numbers wrong, didn't they? To start off with. Well, yes, I've heard of, the 3 million, the 3.5 million. I never heard of the 5.5 million. So it's almost 2 million people they hadn't accounted for. And if they've been doing that every year, there must be a lot of people not coming forward. I'm wondering, do we have any figures on the total number of Europeans that might be in Britain? No.
No, I gather no records have been kept.
Well, no, there's no ID card. It's like the Windrush thing. If there had been an ID card, then I do have a very old aliens ID card for a great aunt of mine in the 1930s. So they did exist. But
yeah, the lack of a registration system doesn't help, but I can tell you some numbers of where we are now. So in 2016, the ONS estimated that there were 3 million EU citizens, which is why the organization, the 3 million, called themselves the 3 million. The Home Office has so far granted 5.4 million statuses under the EU settlement scheme. Of course, not all of them are EU citizens. Some of them are family members, but family members represent about 10%. So still, we're looking at nearly 5 million EU citizens. There is also at the moment a backlog of 340,000 applications still to be decided right now.
Yes,
and at the moment, they're getting 10,000 new applications per day. So in the month of June alone, you're looking at another 300,000 applications. So by the time they're done, you're looking at
a million behind. Yeah. Oh. Do you I was reading something called, UK in a Changing Europe? Do you know this group? And they've done a report on the settlement scheme that I read through, and he was saying exactly what you're saying, more or less, about the demographics. They have no idea of the numbers, and they have no idea of how many people haven't come forward. That's the problem. Yeah. And are people very dissatisfied with it? Are there a lot of complaints?
Do you mean complaints about the EU settlement scheme? People, as a rule, don't complain very much because they haven't necessarily got an expectation of how it should work. And also the way it should work fundamentally in its inception is a violation of human rights. So people respond to that, but that's, it's actually quite functional. And for most people, it works the way it is intended to. The fact is, though, that the way it's intended to work is very problematic for a lot of people, like your family members, where, they don't necessarily have the digital skills, the digital facilities. You have to use a particular mobile phone. You have to be digitally literate, and you also have to know English well enough. And then when you're going through the application proper on the website, the terms that are used are very legalese. If you're making an application for your children, it doesn't ask you for the parents' details, it asks for the sponsor's details. Who's the sponsor? This is not easy language for people to understand, for whom, by definition, this is not their first language. And I have a lot of clients who can't read or write, not in their first language. Never mind their second, third, or fourth. Many of them speak multiple languages, and English isn't the first. Who knew?
Yeah.
So there is an arrogance in the way it's incepted, but I don't want to throw too many of these details in. I get my chance to speak, so please, Dominique, tell us more about your personal journey and your personal story.
Well, I suppose the personal journey is that I'm a second generation French person. We came over because France was at war with Algeria. My father didn't want to fight. And he was a bright scholar and got a place at Oxford. So my parents settled here, and my father and my mother both had academic careers, which was fine. And I was born during the Algerian War, so I was born still over there. It was after I was born that he left and vowed he would never live in France again. So I'm not what you'd call a typical typical French person. Because my parents were French and my mother had studied law, well, both of them had studied law, they were very stickler about paperwork. And from very young, we knew we had to have our passports up to date. We knew that we weren't allowed an identity card at the time, but that we would have to get one. And we'd have to tell the French consulate if we did things like get married or whatever. And so I was very aware, and they loved this live and let live that we had in England, where you could get child benefit just by making a phone call. You didn't have to prove anything. That this belief in the human being that was what attracted people that live under a Catholic church or a more strict type of written down life were very attracted to. So they were very happy. So I left here after I did my university studies and lived in Spain for 15 years, where I married, had children, etc. And only came back because my mother was diagnosed with cancer. So I came back with the children very young, and after about 5 years or 6, she died, and then it was too much time to go back again. Really, there was no going back. And we'd all settled here, so we stayed. So I was sort of doing a repeat performance of my parents somehow. So it was devastating when Brexit happened for us. We were all in complete shock. Everybody was in complete shock, and I slowly discovered that the whole my street had voted Brexit, and even people with a dual nationality background had voted Brexit. Some of my black students at university had voted Brexit. Everybody seemed to have voted Brexit, and we had not been aware of the fact that there was such a surge of anti-European feeling. So it turned out that one of the people that I worked with also voted Brexit, and this was one drop too many for me. And my doctor suggested I'm not going to work for a while. In fact, I took a year off and then retired. It was so. Then the wait between 2016 and the settlement scheme, which is the first thing that we really got. Well, now this year, because we finally got to 2020, we're beginning to see the little things that are making life so different to what it used to be, I suppose, is the way. I'm trying to organize a trip to France. I've discovered that the phone companies don't only have up to 90 days now to be able to, for their contracts of roaming. I've discovered that you have to have an extra little piece of paper for your insurance if you're driving over. That you have to, there's other things apart from COVID that are happening that are due to Brexit, and that are actually going back to the early, to when I was a child, and we used to have to say that we had £50 when we were leaving the country. And I find this devastating. And I'm in the luckiest possible situation because I'm retired. I don't depend on anyone, but it's devastating. And I can't see it separately from the rest of Brexit, I'm afraid, the settlement scheme. I wish they'd give you a card. I mean, I think that would be, the short, then you'd have something in front of you, But we don't even know if it's worth the paper it's written on. No, because Boris Johnson hasn't affirmed that this is going to be, he hasn't. So it's very difficult to be in limbo for such a long time. I suppose COVID was less difficult because we already were in limbo. So we don't get depressed, don't do that. So we have seen that there'll be a big fall in migrants. One of my sons is a doctor, you can imagine. I mean, all the doctors and nurses, especially mental health and things and old people, you can imagine they're all Europeans. He's got over half his staff, and some days the only person who's English is the patient. So they're wondering and worried about what's going to happen. And then you get the impression that British don't want to train staff to do those jobs, that they're just going to import them again from Philippines or somewhere even further across the world. I take it personally. I take the whole thing personally. I don't know what other Europeans feel, but I feel I did take it personally.
It is personal.
It is personal.
There's no doubt about it. No ifs, ands, or buts. It is personal. It is an assault on our European identities.
I don't know. You sort of think about it and look at history, and I don't know, your feelings about what there is in the British character makes it feel superior to other Europeans. I mean, and the rest of the world by extension. But there is something that they think they can go it alone. And when I say they, I would have said we in the old days. It's very strange. I don't know. I wish Britain luck. I really do. But I'm sort of waiting to see what happens. We're waiting to see what happens. Are there very positive stories about Brexit? Do you get good news about Brexit? We don't know each other, do we?
I know one.
Good.
The people I see on my screen right now. That's it. Nothing else. Just the grassroots solidarity amongst campaigners and activists, and the fact that actually the UK now has the most powerful, strongest pro-European movement anywhere in Europe. Possible,
yes, absolutely. I don't think anybody else is going to leave the European Union quickly. Not a good idea. But yes, it's a very strange, coated in this "we control our frontiers" business, which is, I don't know what that is really, seeing as they've invited lots of people from Hong Kong have been invited. We will be importing nurses and all the rest of it from South Africa or Philippines or somewhere, because they need the labor, unless they change their government policy and train up and not cap the number of doctors or not cap the number of nurses. But I don't see them investing in that sort of thing, though. So it's difficult to know how they're going to deal with this. But it's very, very, very sad, this whole hostile environment that they're proud of. It's economic labor, all I can think of. The cultural side is gone. I wonder.
Well, thank you very much, Dominique, for that personal perspective. We'll now move on to Cosima.
If I manage to unmute myself. Yes, thank you very, very much for inviting me tonight. And I hope you don't mind that I've already jumped in. I'm going to introduce myself properly now. My name is Cozy. I'm originally from Germany. I've lived in the UK for nearly 33 years. And I'm here to tell you a little bit about the In Limbo project. So thank you very much, Gavin, and the organisers at North Hearts for Europe for giving us the chance here to tell you about the In Limbo project. We're a distinct and separate group, but of course we work very closely with the 3 Million and British in Europe, as well as many other groups, and we all mutually support each other. I think I just alluded to it, that is the one good thing that's come out of Brexit, is the support that you find from other campaigners. In Limbo is a not-for-profit project entirely funded by donations, and to date we have presented over 1,200 books to politicians and journalists throughout Europe. And our In Limbo books, they're right here, my tattered first edition copy. They are also marvelous gifts for the leavers in your life. I'm not alone. I've got 300 friends in the people who have contributed to our 2 books, and we represent but a small sample of the more than 6, possibly 7 or 8 million citizens in the UK and in the EU 27 countries who are in limbo and have lived in uncertainty for 5 years now. At times, we didn't know what our rights would be a single week ahead, much less able to plan for the future in any sort of meaningful way. So add to that are approximately 15 million family members, such as my British husband, my 2 children who are British citizens, and you will find that almost a third of the British population has been silenced. And I dare say there are a lot of members of North Hearts for Europe who are in that bracket. So in order to find each other and amplify our voices, we started the Facebook group Our Brexit Testimonies in March 2017 and published the first book in limbo on the first anniversary of the referendum. So yes, we actually collected all the testimonies and wrote the book and published it in all of 12 weeks, which apparently was impossible, but we didn't know that yet. In 2018, we repeated this stunt and worked with the group Brexpats Hear Our Voice to publish our second book on the second anniversary of the referendum. So this is In Limbo 2. The In Limbo 2 testimonies speak of the anger of the British citizens resident in Europe who feel not only betrayed, as we all do, but they also feel ashamed and cast adrift. They're incensed. They really are furious that we're being used as bargaining chips. I do have the chip on my shoulder to prove it as well. You know, at the time we were told this was done to secure their rights, but really it serves no other sensible purpose but to divide and rule. So instead, they stand with us in solidarity. We're twins. We're mirror images of each other and flip sides of the same coin. We've made the same journey, just in opposite directions. So actually, we at the In Limbo Project have shown more care and consideration to many British citizens resident in the UK than some of their own families back home who voted leave. So we focus on the human side, and our aim is to touch hearts and open minds by giving a voice to a few of the individuals who've been portrayed as a depersonalized mass of migrants, which is actually and factually incorrect. We're citizens. Until the 31st of January 2020, British people were included in that bracket of EU citizens. And we are all equal and benefiting from the same rights. So why should we stay here and pay tax on our income if we're not truly welcome? So as you can imagine, quite a number of our group members have embarked on their very own #Brexodus, such as Luciano, an Italian citizen who moved to Spain. So it's not a case of moving back, which is not really necessarily possible. He moved because he could to another EU country because he's still got freedom of movement. And Luciano said, I came here as a citizen of Europe within Europe, but things have changed. I have experienced how the media have stopped referring to me as an EU citizen and started calling me an EU migrant. This was done to dehumanize me, and xenophobia is being normalized in order to get rid of people like me. Today, I'm voting with my feet. And Pia, whose British husband dragged her to Germany, definitely not the same country she'd left 35 years before. She said, goodbye, UK. You were good to me, and then you weren't. Now, personally, I am exhausted. Brexit has turned my life upside down and completely changed my career and everything you can imagine. It's changed so much. I've been working so hard, missing my children's childhoods into the bargain, to make British people aware of how all our rights are being undermined. They're not only my rights and EU citizens' rights, they're also your rights. And I do this because, to quote Edmund Burke, for evil to prevail, all that is necessary is for good people to do nothing. In years to come, I will know what I did to stop evil. So will many other campaigners, so will the many volunteers who work in the In Limbo project, in the 72 grant-funded organizations that are helping EU citizens with making their applications to the EU settlement scheme. And really, it's up to each person to know for themselves what they've done. So how do you think I felt having to tell my daughter on the way home from the high school's open evening that when she would start secondary school, I might no longer have the right to live here anymore. Of course, this was before the EU settlement scheme existed, but that's how the situation was at the time. So the EU settlement scheme has given us a degree of certainty, but it's still not great. So we pose in the In Limbo project a very simple question. Where is home? Is home where your heart is? That can be in many places. Is it just the place where you live? Well, I've lived in Great Britain for 33 years, 30 of them feeling at home in Merseyside. I'd acquired the right to apply for British citizenship back in the 90s, but this government, specifically Theresa May, stripped that right from me in 2011 without even a courtesy call, without informing me. And this hurts, and yes, I am bitter. I do proudly call myself a European Scouser. Even though I wasn't born here, I had the good fortune and the privilege to fall in love with Liverpool as a student. And after more than 25 years, I'm still in touch with a group of friends from uni, where only one was originally from Liverpool, and yet we all met as equals and got on, welcoming each other. The locals taught us incomers to be just as open and welcoming as all of Liverpool. It is not just about Brexit, but also about the hostile environment and how our human rights are violated. 30 years ago, I campaigned with the NUS against cuts to student grants. I didn't have to do this. I didn't receive a grant. I had an allowance from my dad. I worked in Germany during the holiday days, earning 3 times what I could earn here to supplement my living expenses. And you see, I didn't come here for a better life. And my fees were paid for by the German government. I did campaign and march in solidarity with my classmates. And now, in the last 5 years, I found solidarity from quite a lot of British citizens, but we still need your solidarity. We still need more of that solidarity in looking after EU citizens and how they are affected by Brexit, and in particular by the kind of Brexit that this government is delivering. Do excuse me, and the way in which everyone's human rights are violated. So the EU settlement scheme became necessary to enable EU citizens in the UK who had hitherto exercised the treaty right to freedom of movement to get an immigration status under UK law. So until now, our rights were governed by EEA regulations. Now we have to move them under UK law.
Yeah.
In spite of the Leave campaign's promise on the 1st of June 2016 that nothing would change for EU citizens already resident in the UK, this government made a choice not to use a simple declaratory system for the EU settlement scheme, but to design it as an application. So this is the problem, that how it is designed. It is designed to fit with the hostile environment. That's how it was laid out. An application can be denied. So now I, like Dominique, had to apply to stay in my home of 3 decades. As you've already heard, the app is done with an app. The application is done with an app on a mobile phone. This is used to scan the biometric chip in the applicant's passport and to take a photo, which is checked by facial recognition software. Then you enter your national insurance number and the system automatically checks with HMRC and DWP records going back 7 years for official contacts to prove your residence. In law, the EU settlement scheme is underpinned by Appendix EU to the 1971 Immigration Act, which demands that in order to be considered lawfully resident, you must show that during the qualifying period of 5 years, you were not out of the UK for more than 6 months. Now, the automated checks typically only find one piece of residence evidence per year, your annual tax return. So the majority of applicants need a second piece of residence evidence per year for 5 years. You also have to pass the suitability check, which means that you have to declare any criminal convictions or arrests. The system automatically checks with the police national computer, and if you fail to declare an open arrest case or a conviction, that gives grounds for a refusal of the status. Making false declarations on an immigration application is a criminal offence. So it is actually an honesty check. Going back to the facial recognition software, you know how Snapchat has a beauty filter? Well, this app has an ugly filter. You don't want to know what my picture looks like. It's horrendous. Among IT professionals, it is well known that facial recognition software is not good at recognizing dark skin tones. But we all know all Europeans are white, right? There's no such thing as a Black European, is there? No, not maybe somebody who was born in Africa, lived and worked in an EU country for decades, where they're naturalized and where their children were born. No, these people obviously don't exist. So yes, there is a racist element to the app and to the application. As an EU citizen who has been resident in the UK since before December 1988, I was also eligible to apply under the Windrush scheme. So this is, people associate with the Windrush scheme people who came from Commonwealth countries, but actually it's open to people from any country as long as they were resident in the UK before December 1988. So for a lot of EU citizens, this is an option, and that would actually give you a physical status because you get a biometric residence card with it. With the EU settlement scheme, you only get a digital status. Now we found I work for one of the 72 grant funded organizations, and we have found a lot of problems with employers not having a clue about how to check the right to work for EU citizens. So much so that a number of grant funded organizations, one of them is Citizens Advice Liverpool, have gotten together and are organizing information sessions. So I will actually send you, Gavin, I will send you out a flyer with some more information. We did one today with Ake, who's going to be speaking in a few minutes as well. This is a real issue, and this is going to be a real problem because employers haven't got a clue what's going on and what they're supposed to be doing. So we have this system. It is fundamentally unfair. It is fundamentally hostile. And we need each other to counteract this hostility and to create a more welcoming environment. And for that, I actually would like to ask everyone who's watching this to remember that they should call out wherever and whenever they see racism and xenophobia. Protect the victims. Ask the EU citizens in your life, your work, your neighborhood, how they are. And please talk about politics, what the European Union means, what Brexit inflicts. Has anybody found a benefit yet, apart from the solidarity? Times have changed around us. Where do you come from is no longer the innocent question, simply expressing interest and curiosity. I hope we can claim back, in the spirit of celebrating our diverse origins and backgrounds, this very question. Elsewhere in the UK, they welcome the foreign foods, but not the people who make it. Liverpool does appear to be an isolated bastion of friendship in a sea of indifference and xenophobia. I do wish we could have remained united in diversity. So please do continue campaigning, do continue writing to your MPs, ask them to give a physical proof of their status to EU citizens, and keep shouting out that Brexit is not working. So thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Cozy. Now we'll move on to Ake, who needs to unmute, I think.
Yeah. Hi, Gavin. Thank you very much for inviting me to join you guys. I think my personal story really, so I'm an EU citizen, but I don't feel like an EU citizen at all. So my personal story is I am from the Ivory Coast. I was born in the Ivory Coast. So I was what the international law would call me a child laborer. So somebody, a child who does not have the opportunity to go to school, instead of that, go work in the plantation with his family, or the traffic or things like that. So you have two types of labor exploitation. So you have the children who will be in traffic, And you have those who are working with their parents, like many African people are working with our parents back home, and like many European are working with their parent, but this does not make them child labor. But for some reason, for us in Africa, it makes us child labor. So when you label someone in a particular way, so you identify that as a problem, you need to be able to address this problem. But unfortunately, the international community does not address each problem. They just put a sticker on us as child labor. So the solution for that is to save Africa by sending a lot of money to Africa to try to help us. But of course, all the money they're sending home is just to feed the dictators. That's the only thing it does to how company will operate in Africa. We don't give any opportunity to African people to get a job. Instead, everything that is invested from a foreign company in Africa is sent back to Europe. So it makes life difficult for us over there to be able to support ourselves. So the solution we have, if we cannot claim human rights in our own country, then we have to claim human rights somewhere else. So we hear during the Brexit period, we haven't heard a lot of African coming to Europe to claim benefits. And I think I had a problem with that is we are not coming to Europe, is we are leaving our country because of all the problem that has been created by many other people than ourselves. So I came to Europe when I was 10 years old. I left all my family, my mother, my father, my brothers and sisters, and everyone. I came to Europe, me and my sister. My sister was 12 years old, and I was 10 years old. So when you are 10 years old and you have to leave your entire family to go to a continent you don't know, to a country where it's really cold, country where you have a continent or country where you have never seen what is this white thing, dropping from the sky. And later on, you learn that it's called snow and it's freezing, you know. So you really leave a really great environment hard to get into a continent and country where you don't know anyone. You don't see people look like you. You see people who don't look like you, who speak another language that you have never spoken before. So I arrived in France at the age of 10, and I spent quite a few years in France until I moved to the UK in 2016. While I was in France, I had a lot of experience of discrimination and racism in employment in a normal life. So racism has been part of really my entire life, I would say, really. You've been told, go home, go back to Africa, monkey. You've been called all the names, really. So for me personally, when you've been called this kind of a name, you kind of build yourself a strong armor around you. It always hurts, but you find a way to deal with that. So when I moved to the UK in 2016, um, I arrived here, so I found a job. And in 2008, that's where, for me, I experienced Brexit before Brexit. So as a French national myself, um, I had the legal right to work in the UK, but at the time, my employer believed that I did not have the legal right to work because my French national ID card was not good enough to prove my right to work. Then we had an email going back and forth until my employer threatened to sack me if I did not provide a copy of my French passport, which I did not have at the time. And I had to apply for one, spend money when I did not have to get one. So at the time, I went to the Home Office and I asked them, well, my employer said I do not have the legal right to work, even though I'm a French citizen. The Home Office said, yes, you're exercising treaty right, you have a legal right to work, it shouldn't be a problem. Then I went to back my employer. Of course, my employer said, well, there's a problem because you don't have a legal right to work. Apparently, the employer could understand the law better than the home office. And would have to go to the French embassy to explain the same thing. And I was forced to apply for this passport. I provided the passport. Then finally, my employer allowed me to work. But during this period of time where you have the legal right to work, but somebody thinks that they know the law better than everyone, that you don't have the legal right to work, you still have to feed your family. So how do you feed your family when you don't have the right to work, but you actually do have the right to work? And that's where labor exploitation happens. That's where migration law create labor exploitation, force people into a situation where you are exploited because you need to survive. So at the time I was a member of the trade union, so I asked my trade union to help me. But my trade union said, well, the right to work is not an employment issue, it's an immigration issue. So you need to contact an immigration lawyer. I then contacted an immigration lawyer. They said to me, well, this is not an immigration issue, it's an employment issue. So I was stuck in the middle. But what do I do? There was no one out there to provide any support to me. Then I was made redundant at the time. And then I joined my union as, as a regional organizer. And I was going around to encourage people to join the union and say, well, you join the union, the union's going to help you, they're good, they support workers and everything. I realized that a lot of people who look like me, who have the legal right to work, were being denied the right to work simply because employer did not understand the law. So this was in 2009. So the immigration law, the right to work check at the time was amended. It was in 2008. So this has increased employer responsibility to the right to work check. So as nobody was helping my fellow worker who looked like me, I campaigned within my own union and try to reach out to all the other unions to help us take on these issues. But union were not interested at all. And in fact, union became really, really aggressive because migrant workers is not an issue. It's not a priority for the trade union at all. Also, the trade union official are white men who have no experience of immigration law at all. So when you go to them with an issue you are having as a Black worker, migrant, they're not interested at all. So I campaigned within my union. They were not happy. They were not happy about the work I was doing. So I was organizing migrant work in the community, and my union was not happy about that at all. And they wanted to sack me because of that. And then I resigned. I resigned in 2018. So during that time, we had Brexit. And this became worse for migrant workers, especially those from the BME background. When Brexit happened, a lot of EU citizens were upset because of Brexit. But for me personally, it did not change anything because I was experiencing Brexit since arriving in the UK, really. The discrimination, being denied your right to work, being treated as if you were less than a human being. This did not change anything for me. Mentally, it did not change anything for me. But what upsetting me and many other EU citizens, Black EU citizens, and over from the BME community was that even though we were well aware that we were being treated less than human being and less than British citizen, but when Brexit happened, then you have the whole focus on white EU citizen. And again, Black EU citizen were just completely pushed down the drain as if we were nobody. And the whole support that was given to EU citizen post-Brexit, it was, again, looked like it was mainly designed for white EU citizen because it looks like being a Black person, you cannot be an EU citizen. And it was really hard on many EU citizens from the BME community who many of them were happy that white EU citizens were finally being discriminated against. Of course, I was against this kind of an idea, this kind of view, because it's wrong. it's not because you have suffered for a very, very long time of discrimination that somebody else is suffering discrimination that you should be happy about that. And a lot of EU citizens from our community have disconnected themselves from white EU citizens simply because of this tension, this support that was given only to white EU citizens and not to other EU citizens. So since then, really, I have been campaigning really to try to bring people from a community to realize that Brexit is, even though Brexit is bad, it is an opportunity to bring everybody together, whether you're white, you're black, or yellow, whatever you are, or red, for people to fight against the system rather than amongst ourselves. So to bring white EU citizens, black EU citizens together. Unfortunately, not everyone has accepted this kind of or wants to have this kind of a unity. But personally, I have been since then. So since then, I set up an organization, Migrant at Work, to ensure that what I had been through, I've been going through, or I had been through since 2008, is not repeated. So that EU citizens, mainly white EU citizens, don't have to go through the system where they are losing their job because the employer do not understand the right to work check. White EU citizens not having to be, not being discriminated against and losing the job because now that I've been through all this situation, I know now how to challenge employers when people have this kind of issue with their right to work. So that's why I set up an organization to help migrants, to educate migrants, whoever you are, wherever you come from, to understand how immigration law conflict with employment law to create labor exploitation. And as we are coming to an end, to the end of the transition, the grace period, a lot of the citizens are going to be victim of labor exploitation. And this is something really we're trying to prevent. And we've been working with different organizations, including Citizen Advise Liverpool, to try to educate people to understand what these issues are, for people to understand their right, so that we can work together rather than sit down and enjoy other people to suffer while we Black EU citizens have been through. And I think it's completely wrong. We should be working together rather than enjoying that other people are suffering discrimination. And that is wrong. But what I can see is that every time we have meetings, is I'm the only Black face among all the speakers. Wherever I go, I feel like I'm one in the 3 million. I feel like there is no other Black EU citizen from my community being out there. And a lot of us have been, many have been disconnected really from this Brexit because we feel like we don't get any support from the EU Commission, and all the support is just not for us because we are nobody. And when Cozy was talking about the facial recognition is a really, really big trouble for us. Because, for example, if you get to the airport, for example, when people see us, they see us before they see the color of our passport, even before they see our share code. So if the share code, if the system does not work, so for anyone, any border agent to see us, we are foreigners, we come from Africa. So it's going to be difficult for us. The right to work check and the status check was going to be hard on EU citizens. But for us, it's going to be even harder simply because of the skin or the color of our skin. And we are not getting any support at all from the European Commission at all. And I think this needs to change. So that's why I always like to get involved on this kind of platform for somebody from the EU Commission to listen to me and other EU citizens from my community, if they are, so that they can take into account what we are going through, if their strategy being designed to reach out to EU citizens, so that I can get involved to design those strategy, to put something in place so that my community is being involved rather than being pushed down as if we were worthless and we were not human being. And that's my take on Brexit.